Welcome to Hilary Topper On Air, the podcast you can't afford to miss.
Are you an entrepreneur and endurance athlete? Between work, family, and sports, we're constantly juggling. Then within the sport, we're juggling some more. We have to focus on training, nutrition, equipment, race logistics, and it's easy to get bogged down with all these details. And even easier to feel completely burnt out by it all. So what do? I'm Hilary Topper, and this is Hilary Topper On Air. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking with Tim Delss. He's the owner and head triathlon coach at CB Multisport. Welcome, Coach Tim, to the show.
Thank you for having me today, Hilary.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. I am still a relatively young guy, 34 years old. Have been doing sports in some form or fashion since I was 5. Started with team sports and did that through my youth, and then eventually worked my way into endurance sports in my late teens, and got into triathlon 11 years ago, and started my coaching company 7 years ago. And so now I coach full time, and I work with mostly amateur athletes with families and busy schedules and 9 jobs and everything else that, that we all have to deal with day to day.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about juggling. How can an entrepreneur and athlete handle everything in addition to a family?
Sure. So when I sit down and talk with my athletes, whether they're new clients coming in or at the beginning of a year, or somebody's decided that they want to step up and try a different race distance or something like that, the first thing we do is we sit down and we talk about availability. And it's really easy to sit here and say, oh, well, I can give you 3 hours a day of training and 6 hours a day on the weekends, or, whatever numbers that they think in their head will work. But in reality, that's normally not the case. So when we have that talk, the first thing we do is we write it all down. It's what is your normal schedule now? What time roughly do you wake up? What time do you have to be at work? What time do you typically work till? What are your kids' activities? Do they play sports? Are they in band? Are they, what are they doing that requires them to be taken and dropped off? And, do you got to be at the PTA meetings and things like that? And when we put it all down on paper, where they can visualize it and see it in front of them, typically people realize that they don't have as much time as they think they do. And so once we have that, then we can begin to figure out how to create a training regimen that fits within their lifestyle. Because if you choose to do triathlon, whether it's for health, for fitness, to be competitive, whatever your reason is, if it doesn't fit into your life, then you're not going to stick with it. If you feel like you're constantly running around, you never get a break, you're always tired, That's just not fun for anyone. And at the end of the day, this sport is supposed to be fun.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the endurance athlete. So this person can be really bogged down with all the details that go into the sport. And there are a lot of details. What advice do you give an athlete who wants to stay focused on their goal?
Sure. So the process that I use is I try to simplify everything. There is a lot of noise in triathlon, peripheral noise. The newest gear and technology. Do you have the latest aero helmet? Have you seen the cool new wheels? Have you been to this training activity or that training activity? And it can get to be quite overwhelming quickly. So what I find is if we simplify things and boil it all down to necessity first, then you have a good starting point. You know, do you have your running shoes, and are they, you know, and are they in good condition? You know, if you have a bike, where are you at with your bike? Is it, you know, your first bike, or is it a decent bike, but oh man, now I have envy from all the new bikes that are out? You probably don't need that brand new bike, and it's one more thing to think about. You know, and if you can try to focus on keeping it simple and keeping it light, so to speak, don't bog down on the minute details, and don't focus so hard on the little things, and then you can tend to have a lot more fun. That goes with training as well. Most people get really caught up in the numbers and the analytics of training.
Mm-hmm.
The Garmin and Training Peaks and Strava and Final Surge and all these companies, they do a great job of putting together all these pretty graphs and numbers, and it's really easy to get caught up in that. So it's good sometimes to leave the watch at home when you go for a run, or when you go for a run, just go run based on how you feel and don't spend time staring at your watch.
Mm-hmm.
Choose just one metric to pay attention to instead of how far am I, how much time is it, and how fast am I going. Say, oh, what's my heart rate right now, or something like that. You can always simplify, and that makes it much easier to handle everything inside of the sport.
So you also talked a little bit about the chatter, right, that you're feeling. How do you get rid of those negative feelings, or even, or actually take away the feelings or the talk that people have toward you that say, oh, you should be running faster, or, oh, you should be biking faster? How do you get rid of that?
Sure. So we tend to put a lot of undue pressure on ourselves. You know, typically if you're in endurance sports, you're striving for something, whether it's a better version of yourself or a faster time, or, something, a better experience. We're looking to grow beyond where we were yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing that, it's really easy to get caught up in the outside stuff and worrying about what your friends are going to think when they see your workout or your race results on social media, or, well, you look pretty fit, how come you run so slow? Things like that. It's really easy to get caught up in worrying about everything else that's around you.
Mm-hmm.
I did that when I was young. I used to really worry about what everybody thought about my results. And all that is going to do is lead you to be miserable. Mm-hmm. This is a hobby. No one's paying you to be here. You're paying to partake in endurance sports, and you joined it for you originally, whether it was to get yourself running again, to get in better shape, to do a bucket list item. You originally started this for you. So you should be training and racing for you. You shouldn't be doing it for other people, or for the instant gratification of, well, I posted my workout on Facebook and let's see how many likes I can get. It's really easy to get caught up in that. And something nice about posting your recap and you had a great race and 150 people comment and tell you great job.
Right.
That feels good. But then conversely, what happens when it doesn't go well?
Mm-hmm.
Then what do you do? So the more you can make it about just you and not the outside, then it makes it much easier to be happy with where you're going. Or if it's not going well, it's much easier for you not to get drugged down by it.
That's awesome. Well, before we move on, I have to say that I am so appreciative of our sponsors and must thank them. Please support our sponsors and tell them that you heard about them on Hilary Topper On Air. Special thanks to the Russo Law Group, MetPro, once again Nut Butter, Fortune of Fine Jewelry, and Strain Print. So, Tim, back to you and CB Multisport. Now, let's talk about training. Training for endurance sports is beyond tough. What can you tell the athletes who experience burnout? And can you address that? Why does that happen?
Sure. So burnout is typically the result of piling a whole lot of things up. Like when we started the conversation, I said, you know, we sit down, we write out a schedule, and then you realize how much time you have. And what happens is most amateurs, you know, most amateur athletes think that they are not doing enough in terms of their training.
Mm-hmm.
We work in a sport. This is a sport where we have easy access to the professionals. You know, it's not like professional baseball, professional basketball, something like that, where where you sit in a stadium or arena and you look from afar.
Mm-hmm.
In our sport, the professionals race when we race. You can walk up to them on the starting line. You can have personal relationships with them. And because of that, we tend to see a lot of what they do on back to social media, you know, and yes, there is a benefit to doing more training, you know, in the general scheme of things, if you can. So what happens is most people try to cram in as much training as possible with the rest of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, you spend 6 to 9 months being sleep deprived and getting up at 4:15 to get your workout in, and then getting another workout in after lunch, and maybe sneaking in a weight session or whatever. And eventually all of that catches up with you.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I do to help avoid that with my clients is when we sit down and we make that schedule, we say, okay, well, you can realistically give me 90 minutes Monday to Friday, and then, you know, 3 hours on Saturday and 3 hours on Sunday or whatever. So I use that as a maximum limit. And the point of that is so that they do get downtime after dinner to sit down on the couch and mindlessly scroll through their phone or catch up on their DVR or sit down and talk with their spouse, you know, or whatever. It gives them a chance to kind of detox
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, you know, and actually stop moving and relax. So as long as you can set yourself some kind of a parameter, you know, and it could be as little as, hey, I want to be active at least 30 minutes a day, but during the week I can't do any more than an hour. You know, then even if you don't have a training plan and you're kind of making it up as you go, the 30 minutes says, okay, I'm going to get out the door and do something, but the hour says I'm not going to overdo it and I'm going to give myself some freedom.
Mm-hmm.
It's also okay to, if you're feeling run down and you have a coach or a training plan and you're dragging yourself out of bed for 3 days, take the rest day. Even if you have workouts scheduled, take it, because it's amazing what 24 hours will do for you physically and mentally. So a lot of it is really just common sense. It's just hard to think that way when you're in the middle of all of it.
Now, a lot of our listeners are small business owners or entrepreneurs, and they're pretty much type A personalities, kind of like myself. A lot of them go for a half Ironman or an Ironman, and I've talked to a few of them, and they said that after they finished an Ironman event, they tend to get depressed and burnt out. Can you tell me why? And if that's the case, is it really worth it?
Sure. So there are 3 different types of people in my dealings, like there's 3 different reasons that I've really seen that people sign up for like an Ironman. One is it's a bucket list item. And so those people, they're usually 50-50 on whether or not they do one, and then they're just done. And either way, that's perfectly fine. You know, they had this thing, they wanted to check off the list, they wanted to experience it, and that's great. The second type of person is what used to be the most common was the people that joined the sport, started with sprints and Olympics, and then, you know, worked their way up from there. And then, oh, well, I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years, and let's go do an Ironman. Those people tend to be the most successful at it because they take their time and build up to it. And those also tend to be the people that have the most staying power in the sport. And then the third is the people who get into this and they do a sprint or an Olympic, and then they see all the M.Dot tattoos and all the Ironman swag, and all of their friends have done an Ironman. So they want to do one because they kind of want to join that club. Mm-hmm. And that's fine to have that feeling. Typically, those people, though, make a very big jump going from doing short course and not having a lot of experience to, hey, I've done 2 Olympics and I'm signed up for Ironman next year, you know? And so it's overwhelming, the differences in training between short course and an Ironman. Like a half Ironman is roughly double what an Olympic is. But if someone's ever done both, they'll tell you that a half Ironman is way more than twice as hard as an Olympic, you know, and an Ironman is the same way. It may be double a half in distance, but it's exponentially harder, and the training takes a whole lot more time. So if you haven't progressed into it and you just kind of jump in with 2 feet, then it's really easy to get overwhelmed and to end up having that feeling of burnout. As far as the depression-ish side of it, or kind of the crash off of the high, Ironman is a big challenge. You know, that distance, 140.6 is a really big challenge. And most people, when they're training, that is, you know, the bulk of what they're thinking about in their life, because it's such a big undertaking. Mm-hmm. There's all this buildup in your mind to get there, and rightfully so. Mm-hmm. When you finish it, you know, you cross the finish line. The saying is, from miles 10 to 26 of the marathon, I'm never doing another one again. And the next day, you know, you're like, oh man, I heard I'm never doing one again. And 2 days later you go, oh, where's the next one I could sign up for? Right? You have this, there's this really, you know, you're hurting during the race, and then you have this big crash that comes afterwards because, well, now it's over. And then people kind of, well, now what do I do? You know? And so then they end up going and they go and sign up for another one because they need that. Mm-hmm. The best way to combat that, I have found, is to not make triathlon everything. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to make it everything in your life because it takes a large portion of your life, you know, of your daily life to train for. So if you can have something else, or make a plan for after it, whether it's to go on vacation, or I'm going to go golfing with my buddies, or I'm going to go camping with my kids, you know, something that's out there as the reward for the race. It'll help to keep you from basically stepping off that cliff after you cross the finish line.
That's great. Now, you coach all different levels in your practice?
Yes, ma'am. I've worked with everything from first-time 5K and 10K runners up to World Championship qualifiers.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, how can people get in touch with you to learn more about your coaching services and CB Multisport?
Sure. If you want to learn more about the company, you can find us at www.cbmultisport.com. www.cbmultisport.com. Or you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/CB Multisport. If you want to just keep an eye on us and the content, we're on Instagram, same handle, CB Multisport. We're pretty easy to find, pretty easy to get a hold of.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Coach Tim. I'm talking with Coach Tim Delss of CB Multisport. And I want to thank you, Coach Tim, for being on the show. I also want to thank our sponsors, the Russo Law Group, MedPro, Strain Print, and Fortune Fine Jewelry. And last but not least, I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. If you want more information on this show or any other show, visit our new website at hilarytopperonair.com, or you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, you name it, we're out there. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Hilary.